What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Blerd Out. One Piece chapter 1168 has dropped, and it looks like we are getting a break after this one, so we're going to be sitting on this chapter for the next 2 weeks. Naturally, we're going to talk about it today. If you have not come to the latest chapter's episodes, please note there will be spoilers ahead.
Spoilers.
Okay, chapter 1168, Elbaf Snow. So for the cover request, we have Hachi, and he's hanging out with a bunch of sheep that have knit him some gloves. And it looks like Hachi's just doing a really nice thing and like digging up snow in front of the sheep's house. So pretty much just doing like yard work. And as a thank you, the sheep knit him gloves and they have like coffee and stuff. Really cute, really adorable. Let's get into the chapter. So we're looking at 15 years ago, still the same year as last chapter, just a little ahead in the future. And essentially we're seeing the fruits of King Harold's labor. So you have people talking about the giants and the marines, how they're actually creating a positive view for regular people, where everyone's like, hey, they're reliable, they're nice, they're doing a great job. And this makes me a lot less afraid of giants in general. Like, I'd actually like to meet one. You have products from Elbaf making their way into standard markets. So you have like food, you have lumber. Elbaf essentially is becoming an open nation with the rest of the world. And so we go back to Elbaf and you have King Harold addressing the masses. And he's basically saying like they've done 90% of the work, they are almost there. He's like, once we finally become a member nation, we're gonna be one with the rest of the world. And what I want for my people is for them to be able to leave Elbaf and visit my allies, to visit all these other nations and see what they're up to. Because just as a lot of the world hasn't seen giants, the giants haven't seen a lot of the world. While Elbaf isn't closed off like Wano, it is in a similar vein in which they are disconnected from a lot of the world. And he tells his people that while they are a minority, there are a bunch of places that have basically melting pots of different cultures and races, all coexisting. And he wants his people to be part of that melting pot. And his people are into it. Like, there's not really any dissent from the people. They all seem pretty excited about this new progression. After the speech, we have a moment with Harold and Saul, and they're talking in front of the Walrus School. And he has like some kids out playing in the playground. And they're basically thinking back on how they got to this point and how everything has worked out up to this point. Now, Saul does pose a solid question saying like, don't you feel like you may have lost something here? Like you made it a long way. Don't you feel like you lost something along the way? And Harold says that he doesn't think military power is what makes a country strong anymore. And he states that this belief, this idea, comes from Ida. And as he's saying that, we get a picture of Ida's grave. So it's become apparent that Ida did in fact pass away from the poisoning. Now we immediately go into a flashback where Harold and Ida are talking. And this is while Ida is essentially on her deathbed. And she's talking about how much Elbaf has changed since Harold has gone on his mission to get world peace. She says that when she first got here, there was tons of internal conflict. It was scary, it was violent. But now you have children that, laugh and play instead of fight. You have peace, you have calm, you have such a different way of living than what she was introduced to. And Harold says like, yeah, basically those are all our old customs. We are throwing all of those out the window. To which Ida responds that she actually likes some of the old customs, notably a warrior's pride. And she found that really endearing. And this is one of those moments where I feel like Harold isn't really listening, because he's like, nah, that's part of our old ways. Like we got to get rid of that because things like that are why I can't marry you. And I don't think Ida is really talking about, I wish you guys would be like warriors still and just basically brutal savages. She's like, I miss parts of your culture that weren't inherently bad. Whereas having a pride of a warrior doesn't make you inherently violent or evil. It just means you're prideful in your ability. But Harold wants to tie every single thing to, that tragic past or that terrible past of savage warriors so that he just wants to throw it all away. Anything that's considered part of the old custom, he wants to get rid of. And then Ida hearing about, Harold wanting to legally marry her, of course, makes her smile. And she says, that's a really sweet thing. She loves that idea. And she asks about Loki. To which Harold responds that Loki will always be Heidruten's kid brother, which is what Ida wants to hear, right? Ida wants Loki and Heidruten to feel like actual brothers, thicker than blood, essentially. And she's happy that Harold feels the same way because she's like, yep, that's what keeps me going. Knowing that Loki and Heidrun, they're being treated the same. They're being treated like brothers. They're being treated with love. That's what keeps me going. And she then says that basically Harold's almost there, which if you go back to the speech, this is essentially what he's talking about, how he's basically at that goal of becoming a member nation. And upon hearing that, Harold gets super excited. He stands up and he's like, yep, it won't be long. Soon we'll be connected with the whole world. Like, we'll be connected to everything in a matter of time. And as he's like getting up, getting excited and talking about that, Ida actually lays down, which is a signal that she's basically weakening. And we get like a cute flashback of them in the old days where like very young Ida and Harold, back when he had hair and his horns. Essentially the start of the flashback. And unfortunately we get Ida's last words, where she says, that sounds amazing, I'm looking forward to it. And she reaches out to hold Harold's hand, but unfortunately it goes limp and falls to the side. And this is signaling her death. And in the next panel, you have Harold walking outside with his hand over his face, and then essentially everyone else rushing in. You have the new giant pirates led by Heidrun rushing inside to see Ida. And this is where you get the reaction of Heidrun crying over the loss of his mom. You have Harold crying. You have Loki in his prison cell. Obviously, he got arrested for burning down Alcohol Village. And we don't really see anything from Loki besides him grabbing the brim of his hat and tipping it, which is his own way of acknowledging what just happened. Jump forward a year, so 14 years ago. We go to Maryjoy, and it looks like Shanks is missing. And now Harold is speaking with the Gorosei, and they tell him that if Shanks was still here and completed his last mission, he would have been formally knighted, which means he would have been promoted to a God's Knight. Since he's missing, that promotion now lies to Harold. And I think it's pretty important to note that Shanks probably chose this time to very specifically leave because he didn't want to be fully inducted. Because as we'll learn from Harold, once you get fully inducted, you become subservient to Emu. There is no, option to make your choices. You're just locked in. And Harold, hearing that he has the opportunity to become a full-fledged God's Knight, obviously jumps on it because he's like, yes, this is what Elbaf needs to finally become a member nation. And so the Gorosei start leading him to the throne room, and they're like, all right, Emu has agreed to trust you. Emu has agreed to, put you through this process. Get ready to accept this change. You're going to be known as the king who brought great change to Elbaf. And as they say that, Harold actually mentions that once Elbaf is inducted into the world, once it becomes a member nation, he plans to step down from the throne and essentially pass it on to one of his kids. Now, when he says that, we do get like St. Peter looking off to the side. So obviously there's not a lot of good reception to what Harold just said. And in response to that, Emu actually says that is a matter for Mu to decide. So Emu hears that Harold does not want to be king anymore. He's like, that's not up for you to decide. Upon seeing Emu sitting on the throne, Harold has the obvious reaction of, wait, why is there someone sitting up there? He knows that no one's supposed to be sitting on that throne. That's the whole point of it. But that shock does not seem to last long because they begin the process of inducting Harold into the God's Knights. So we see the symbol on his arm, the original symbol for the God Steel. We see it grow horns. And this is where the art of the chapter kind of starts to fade out a little bit. There was mention that Oda didn't have enough time to finish his chapter before submitting it, so some of it is incomplete. So we're going to see a lot of harsher lines here. But you basically have Harold's arm surging with power as that new mark grows, and he says he can feel it surging within him. And the Gorosei then start to narrate that this is the power of immortality, and that beyond any wild monster, he is a mighty weapon. Emu then says, consider thyself an immortal knight sworn to Mu. Which Harold responds, mortal? Can't believe it. Because that's not really something they discussed beforehand. Emu then instructs Harold to carve a pentagram in Elbaf, and that will mark the bond between us. We know that in the throne room, there was a pentagram that Shamrock and Gunko used to travel there. So now we know why that pentagram is there. So Harold then travels back to Elbaf with a feeling of accomplishment because this is his goal, right? He wanted to become a God's Knight and he wanted to secure Elbaf as a member nation. So he goes back to Elbaf and he announces to his people that as soon as he does this last mission, Elbaf will be recognized. Everyone's cheering, everyone's happy. And then we cut to the castle. And Harold is talking with Emu through the telepathy that they get when they get that power. And Emu basically says, all right, mobilize the entire nation. I want everybody ready to fight. And Harold's like, hold on, wait a minute. Like the whole point of me doing all of this, everything I've been working on is to make Elbaf peaceful. I don't want them to be violent. If there are people that want to enlist in the Marines or people that want to fight, then yeah, sure, but I'm not going to force my entire nation to fight. And you actually have guards outside mentioning that they can hear Harald talking, but considering no one else is in the throne room, they're wondering what's going on in there. And then we kind of get a different view of the telepathy that goes on with Emu and the power that he bestows upon people, because you see like Emu's eyes ringing behind Harald and almost like this hypnotic view of Emu being like, listen, you said you were going to atone for Elbaf's history. You said you'd become my slave, so now you got to do what you promised. And Harald's like, well, that was me. I promised to do that. To which Emu responds like, nah, it's too much for just one person to handle. You all gotta submit. And even if you wanted to, you can't disobey me. Once you enter the deep sea contract, you gain immortality, you gain power, but you lose your ability to defy me. Whether you want to or not, you will carry out my will. And we see Harald struggling to fight off the control, but it's basically taking over. He's grasping at the mark on his arm because that's where the power is surging from. And he immediately calls for the guards to come in and basically chain him to a pillar. And this, I read this and it frustrated me because Harald realizes that the plan was always to enslave the warriors of Elbaf. Harald's like, Emu never wanted us to be a member nation. He wanted us to be an army for him. And I'm like, you got that in 2 seconds because Emu wouldn't let you do what you wanted. Yet everyone else, all the signals, all the stuff that was happening beforehand that was giving off the signal that this was a bad idea, you completely ignored. And then in 2 seconds you pick up, oh, this is a bad idea. And it's like, oh, Harald, you are such an idiot. But yeah, he calls the guards and he tells them to chain him up. And he's like, all right, summon Jarl, get my sons in here immediately. Now at this point in time, Heidrun is out at sea and Loki's imprisoned. So they really don't know what to do, but Harald's like, well, let Loki out, get Jarl up here, just get him here now immediately. And in his mind, he's like, I can't resist this for long. Like, I need them to hurry up. So they let Loki out, they go get Jarl, and this essentially brings us to the point where we start the flashback where Loki and Jarl are walking through the castle and they basically come upon Harald being killed. So we have finally made it full circle back to the beginning of the flashback. We have finally made it to the point that Loki was supposed to spend 3 minutes like Heidrun before we dipped into God Valley and all that insane stuff. Like this, the point that's coming up now is the entire point of the flashback, and it's been so long since we've been here. I just find that really funny. But so the next chapter is going to be what happens that takes Harald's life, and more or less why the guards end up all stabbing him. My guess is that when the guards all stab him, it's not going to kill him because he's going to have more or less Domi reversied. He's going to be in demon mode, and this is why Jarl and Loki are going to have to fight him. As much as I am irritated by Harald's actions, I do want to see what becomes of this moment, because I think this is going to be the moment that will define how Harald goes down as a character. What happens in this next chapter, how he handles it, if he manages to handle it, you know, similar to how Rox did, where he tried to fight it, he tried different ways to overcome it. We got to see what's going to happen here. This is what's going to kind of staple his legacy. Like, will he end up like King Riku, where he was so benevolent and almost too nice that he led his nation to ruin and led himself to ruin, or will he have some kind of like last stand? Very curious to see that. Overall, pretty chill chapter. Like I said, Oda didn't get the chance to complete every single panel, so it's a little rough, but a good chapter nonetheless. We also got the confirmation that Ida did die. I think there was some discrepancy on whether she passed or not, because we never got a confirmation. We have the confirmation now, so it was a mom in a flashback. I don't know why people thought she was gonna make it. I'm being real honest. Overall, a solid chapter. Hey everybody, this actually turned out to be a shorter episode due to some time constraints. But considering we're on break, next week we'll have updates on season and some more stuff I want to talk about, so be tuned in for that. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace.